All right, everybody. A good year, Minatzchim Teva. Minatzchim, this year, we should very, very quickly see this year come into fruition as the Shnas Pedus Tafshin Pei Daled. In the meantime, and Baba Shah, as that is happening, we as Chassidim always know that an Ayar means that we have to recommit ourselves to what it is that our personal avodah is, and the klalistic avodah as shluchim of the Rebbe. That is obvious. The Rebbe has spelled it out to us that our shluchus ikris is to prepare ourselves and the whole world l'kabel pnei Mashiach. And specifically as we are coming from Rosh Hashanah, which reminds us that just like Adam was Nivra Yechidi, because to make the point that it's incumbent on each and every one of us individually to bring to the tachlis, to the matara. So in order to help ourselves and others come to be Makabel Pnei Mashiach and close the Kneifim, we first have to relearn or remind ourselves what it means to connect with Mashiach in a more pratistic eifin, and to connect with our Mashiach, the Yechidah Shabanefesh, the Mashiach within us. And for that, we are honored to have with us in this Farbrengen, Shir and Farbrengen and Shir, of Simon Jacobson, the Rebbe Chayzer, to speak to us on this all-important topic, and not only to speak to us on it, but to inspire us in this regard. So without further ado, Simon Jacobson.
Thank you very much, and thank you for honoring me with this important, critical theme and message. Nothing more fitting and appropriate, especially as we just entered this new year. So let me wish everyone a good Gebench to Yar, Gmar Sima Teva, going from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, which in the language of Chassidus is Binyan HaMalchus. And of course, Malchus includes the ultimate Melech and the ultimate Malchus Mashiach, Melech HaMashiach. And therefore, it shouldn't be a surprise that Yom Kippur, which is a day of Yechidah, we'll discuss that momentarily, is what the whole Binyan HaMalchus of the Aseh Simei Tshuva builds up to. So every day is one of the 10 spheres that build to the full Malchus of Yom Kippur, and its foundation is Yechidah. Now, we all know that many of these concepts and words and ideas can be very esoteric and very abstract and very profound, and maybe there's some that have a hergish and a feeling for what the word Yechidah Shabanefesh is. But I think for most of us, we need also oisius, words, to make it more palatable, something that we can relate to more. You know, frankly, we are Gashmizdika people. We're physical human beings. So it's true we have a neshama, and we have many levels of a neshama, but even experiencing nefesh, which is the lowest of the 5 levels of the neshama, is also an achievement. It's also an aveda. Because when you wake up in the morning, the way the Eibishter created us is that we're Gashmizdika people. The first thing you feel is your body. The first thing you feel is hunger, thirst, fatigue, physical experiences. And it takes some work to say, Moidani lefanecha melechai v'kaim shachzata b'nishmosi, and neshamesh and nesata b'taheri, etc. So it's important to acknowledge that even those that are on Bali Madrega levels, the fact is, after the Tzimtzum Arishan, the way the Eibishter made the world was that it's elikus, the elam is b'pshitis and elikus b'schachus. That the first thing we experience is elemus. That's what we see. That's what we experience with our senses, with our sight, our sound, taste, touch, and smell. And it takes effort to discover the elikus, which is the real pshitis, but for us, it takes work and aveda. And that's why it's critical, and that's where Chassidus Chabad comes in to explain these things in Asius or Mepsar Erzelaka, from our flesh, that we can understand it even on the Nefesh HaBamis, even the animal soul should be able to understand it. So let me try to put some words around this concept called Yechidah, which really is another way of explaining what Mashiach is. because Mashiach is the level of Yechida. That's what it says. So let me begin. It's always good to begin with a little, I guess, story. You could say it's a story. It's also a little chazara. So in the year Tovshim Vov, it was the Farbrengen before Kofis, Leil Simchas Teda, very unique Farbrengen. And even though usually shluchim were not there by Simchas Teda, most shluchim were on their shlichus. If any shluchim came to New York, it was usually Shabbos Bereishis, but not Simchas Teda. And yet, interestingly, the beginning of the Farbrengen, after they made Kiddush, the Rebbe asked the shluchim who were there to say L'chaim. And they did, whoever was there, they said L'chaim. And then the Rebbe began the Farbrengen by saying, as steht in Sifrei Cheshbon, as Mashiach, as Shliach, mit Eser, is Gematria Mashiach. I'll translate it just for those that want to need a translation. That's Shliach. When you add 10 to Shliach, that's what it turns into Mashiach. And the Rebbe went on to discuss what is Avedis HaShlichus, and what in that it's all about using our keiches, and together with our shlichus and our keiches, we add up and we create the world called the world of Mashiach. It's in that Farbrengen, actually, the first time that the Rebbe said beferish, where he said that the Nasi Hadeir is Mashiach Shebedar, and he said those words. He said then when as mir art nicht am mivetestaichen kipshute. I remember it like today when the Rebbe said it, because the Rebbe never said something like that literally, and I remember. Just l'chvivusid the milsa, that the Rebbe at the time, I was looking, I remember, how can I find that way that the Rebbe should be Magia this Sikha? Because usually the Rebbe was not Magia Sikhas just like that, only special Sikhas. And I chaptzach with Amtzah that since the Kinus HaShluchim was coming later that year, usually in a Shchedish Kislev time, so we're talking about a month or two after Tishrei, so the Rebbe, so I asked, I decided I'll prepare the Sikha, maybe the Rebbe will be Magiyat in honor of the Kinus HaShluchim. Long story short, the Rebbe was Magiyat. I remember running down just to see, I went straight to that page, I wanted to see what the Rebbe did there, and he left it, and it's published till this day, exactly those words. In that Sikha, the Rebbe speaks relatively longer than usual on the concept of Yechidah. So some what I'm going to be saying now is taken from that Sikha as well as others, and to understand what exactly this meaning, the word Yechid. So let's first start with a little context, some context. We know that it says in Lukutei Torah, Sof Pasha Pinchas, is the first place I think where it says that Yom Kippur, the 5 tefillos of Yom Kippur is Keneged Nefesh Ruach Neshama Chai Yechid, essentially suggesting that every day when we daven, there's 3 tefillos, Shachris Ma'ariv, or you say Shachris Mincha Ma'ariv, and they correspond to Nefesh Ruach Neshama. And then comes on Shabbos and Yontiv, there's Musaf, a 4th tefillah, that's Keneged Chaya, and a 5th tefillah only once a year, Yom Kippur, Yechida. Ne'ilah is Yechida. Based on that, there are a number of Maimorim and a number of Sikhs that discuss these 5 dimensions. So to really appreciate what Yechida is, we really have to talk about the first 4 levels. Because essentially what we're talking about is understanding ourselves on a deeper level. That at the end of the day is what a neshama is. A guf is only a keli, is only the outer levush, if you wish, the outer garment. But as we know, Rosh Hashanah was what happened. Vayikach Hashem Elokim Ofer min Adama. He took dust from the earth, shaped it into a body, and then Vayipach Ba'apov Nishmas Chayim, and he imbued it, he breathed into it a soul of life. And what we learn is what the Medrash says, that soul has 5 names, and those 5 names are really 5 levels. So briefly, if you want to understand a human being, you can't just understand their body. You have to understand what makes them come alive. So on a very basic level, the first step of life is called biological life. That's called nefesh. Nefesh, in the language of Chassidus, it's a level of Olam Asiyah. Or in the Sfiris, it's Nehi. Nefesh basically means there's a simple fact that we are breathing, that our mind is working, our emotions are working, just pure biological life. Call somebody alive. Ruach adds another dimension, emotional life. And again, language of Chassidus, Yitzira, correspond to Ati Yitzarta, not ata nefachta biverati yitzarta. And in the spheres, it's chagas, midas. Then comes neshama. Neshama is intellectual life, the cognitive life. In the elements, it's bria, ata barasa, and in the spheres, it's chabad. See, there you cover what we call the conscious faculties, the esed keiches hanefesh, chabad chagas nihi. In the reverse order is neshama, ruach, nefesh. Then come what we'll call the keiches makifim. This is makifim, we'll call in English, we'll call it superconscious. This is what we're not conscious of. Now, chokhmah is already at least a spark of consciousness. So in superconsciousness, in the spheres, it's kesed. Kesed made of two parts, arich and atik, which correspond to chaya, and deeper than that is pnimius kesed, which is atik. And there you have chaya and yechidim. These are the keiches makif. So every day of the year, we're able to access generally the three first levels. That's what the Aveda kol yem v'yema over the Aveda tmid and kesidra. Shabbos and Yontif, there's a musaf in kol chasen. There's a musaf you're able to access. We'll call it also the transcendent component. And on once a year, achaz b'shana, yechida leyachdecha, Yom Kippur, the fifth. Only after you go through the first four, mind you. You don't jump to Ne'ilah. You go through first Ma'ariv and everything in Kippur, the Ma'ariv, then Shachris, Musaf, Mincha, and then level 5 is Yechidah. But what does it mean in simple English? The first three, relatively, you can explain to people. There's behavioral life, that's Nefesh. There's emotional life, your feelings, your emotions, that's Ruach. And Neshama is your intellectual life. And what is Chaya? We'll start with Chaya. So Chaya, transcendent, I called it. Transcendent life means something that's more than just what your mind and your feelings and your behavior lead you to. Transcendence, in simple English, means doing something that's for a deeper purpose, for a higher purpose. You could have a brilliant mind, you could have beautiful emotions, you could behave in a beautiful way, so you have Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, but Lav Dafki, you have a Tachlis. What's a Tachlis Achayim? So transcendental life means there's a deeper purpose. You know, in language in Aveda, you can call Kabbalah Sel Machlo Shamayim. Not just Kabbalah Sel mitzvahs, not just the specifics that we do in the Keiches Gluyim, in the internal faculties that we use, but something that's beyond that. In the language of a Keser, Chitzenis HaKeser is Ratzin. Ratzin is Asher Kedeshana B'Mitzesav V'Tzivanu. Not the details, al atifas talis, la niach film, al achilas matzah, al netilas lulav. But Asher Kedeshana says the Ratzin Hashem. You're connecting to God's Ratzin, not just to the pratim, but to the actual Ratzin. So then what is Yechida? So Yechida is the level Yechida liyachdach. So it's a connection that's even higher than Ratzin Hashem. You're connecting to, even though it does say in Chassidus that even Yechida is not Etzem HaNefesh because it says Chamisha Shemas Nikrullah, but for all practical purposes, Yechida is as close to the Etzem as possible. So how do we translate that in a language that we can all relate to? So in my Maimonides Chassidus, sometimes it talks about Yechidus, of going into a Rebbe, and Yechidus is your Yechida is connecting with the Rebbe's Yechida. What does that mean? So there's a story I once heard from somebody that went to Yechidus, and the Rebbe said to him, he didn't know what a Rebbe is. A Shliach told him to go into Yechidus. It's a long story, but Bekitzer Nimritz, he said, he invited the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him, so how could I help you? So he says, I don't really know. I was sent here by my rabbi. My rabbi told me when I come to New York, it's good for me to come see you. This was in the Chofs in the 60s. So the Rebbe looked at him and said, look, I'm not comfortable with someone here without really wanting to be here. But once you're here already, maybe you have something you want to ask. So he says to the Rebbe, maybe the Rebbe could tell me, what is a Rebbe? Why do they adore you so much? They love you. They talk about you like in this. So the Rebbe smiled. He says, I'm not responsible for what others say about me, but I'll tell you what I think a Rebbe is. The Rebbe says a Rebbe is someone who's a good friend. He's a good friend to you. Now this guy says to the Rebbe, he says, a good friend, that's all. I have many good friends. What's the big thing of having a friend? So the Rebbe said, no, let me define what a friend is, and then you'll tell me how many friends you have. And the Rebbe said to him, a friend is someone that you could speak to like you speak to yourself. No defenses, no fear, no concern with being judged. or criticized, completely vulnerable, where you could speak to someone without any levushim, without any garments, without any preparation, as if you're speaking to yourself. And the Rebbe said to him, how many friends like that do you have? She says, I don't have such friends. I don't even know if there is such a friend. And he says, that's what a Rebbe is. You could say that essentially all the levushim, so to speak, we talk about nefesh, ruach, neshama, even chaya. At the end of the day, it's the nefesh being expressed in some tziyur, some form, either behavior, nihi, nefesh, ma'aseh b'peil, or midas, chesed, gvura, ava, yira, or chabad, chochma, bina, das. So we know, as he says in Tanya, these are keiches hanefesh. They're definitely from the nefesh. They're not on their own, but they're expressions of the nefesh. Chaya is ein achanami. Chaya is already higher than that. It's a makir, but it's still rotzen hanefesh. Rotzen is from the word merutza, from the word meshicha. A rotzen is still a hamshach. But then there's the nefesh itself. Nothing else. Just the nefesh itself. The pure nefesh without all these garments. It's essentially a place that many of us may not even consciously ever experience, because by definition, it doesn't have a particular experience. But it's when you feel you completely belong. I mean, I'm sure every one of you, every one of us remembers moments, Rosh Hashanah, but I'm going to talk about Yom Kippur. Who doesn't remember as a bacher going about the bracha erev Yom Kippur, Birchas at-Talmidim, and the Rebbe would bench the kinder, his children, the bacher. Or the Rebbe dancing at the end by Ne'ilah. What was the main headache? Besides the Giluyim and the Gewalt of it all, there was a certain purity, where you feel that there's nothing else but Eined Milvade. It's just you and the Rebbe, you and the Eibishter alone, and it's just Yechida Li'achdach. No agenda, no cheshbenis, nothing is just pure. In a way, it's like going back to your innocence of who you are in your purest form, like when we're born. That's really what it comes down to. The neshama has to go through all the layers and the levels of Yechid Chaya and Atabarasa, Yitzarta, Nefach. But in its purest form, it's in a state.
Okay, you want to follow me, or my?
It's in its purest form. It's in a state of complete belonging. I think anyone, when they feel that moment, when they connected with the Rebbe in that way, that's how you felt. No other cheshbenis. I remember it by the bracha at Yom Kippur, and different moments you have this, just to give a little taste of it. Simchas Teda, of course, is also a yechididik experience in that sense. So when you say yechida shebenefesh, what you're really saying is the best of who you are. We all know what we look like when we're not the best. I'm not going to go, of course, into details. But with the best that you are, maybe the moment you went on shlichus, maybe that moment on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur with the Zaysedis, where you just feel totally connected. We all have a nice nefesh habamis, and we have our challenges. But Yechid is expected of us at certain moments. I once heard the Rebbe say, when he once types, Pischeli kechudesh shel machet, v'ani eftech lechem kepischei shel ulam. So the Rebbe types, Pischeli kechudesh shel machet. Open for me up. The Eibus is just asking kechudesh shel machet, the eye of a needle. And the Rebbe types, 1 second of your day, ein rega, ein vinkele, one corner of your life. But in that corner and in that moment, just me and you, the Eibishter and you, told nothing else. That's Yechida Liyachdacha, where there's a certain sense. It's hard to have that 24/7, halavai. But for a moment, that was what means to go to a Rebbe, to be Yechida to Yechida in a Yechidus. And we know there are many ways of having Yechidus. So now bringing it back to the concept of Mashiach. At the end of the day, Mashiach is not just some guy, some man, some boss of Adam, Melech Beis David, Huge B'Teira Mitzvahs, and all the simonim and all the criteria that the Rambam spells out. Yechid is the best of who you and I are. Because l'chein, you could ask a question, there's one Mashiach. Why do we have to say there's a Yechid in each one of us? There's a Mashiach in each one of us. Because it's not about Mashiach alone. It's about finding within ourselves the Mashiach within us. So that's why the Rebbe says Shliach with Esed Keches is Mashiach, because he wanted to point out this is not just you're going to look at it Mashiach Shebedar. Yes, he symbolizes, he personifies, he captures the in a be'efon kloli what that is. But the goal is to find the nitzutz of that within ourselves. Because if you don't have that, you don't have the gula within us. You can have the gula outside of us, but if you want it within, you have to be able to discover that point. So what does it mean? It's like when we talk to our constituents or balabatim or people come together by Ne'ilah, and the Shalosh says right before you say Shema Yisrael and then Baruch Shem 3 times and Hashem Elokim 7 times. What does it say? To be Mitzayir and imagine Mesidus Nefesh, that you're going on Mesidus Nefesh. What does it really mean? You're asking people that for one moment in the day, the highest point, a Ne'ilah, Mamish at the end, before we blow shofar and so on, that for one moment try to put yourself in a place there's nothing but you and your tachlis and your purpose. We all know life has many different challenges, but for a moment, be'echus, that's a place that every person can reach if they really apply themselves to. So it's really about how do you megala that moment of Mashiach. So obviously with a day like Yom Kippur, we have that ability. Yom Kippur, we shed all the levushim. Essentially, that's why we fast. There's the Hey Yinuyim. It's a whole day Yom Tefillah. We're trying to replicate and create a situation as much as possible to eliminate all the distractions around us so we can access that deeper part. So again, to access it all the time, halavai, but at least that moment. So it's really about saying to people and saying to ourselves, when you are the best that you can be, what are you like? What are the best you can be? I heard the Rebbe once gave my father-in-law a bracha for his Yom Haledes. A beautiful bracha, Tafshin Yud Aleph. His Yom Haledes was the end of Elul. And the Rebbe said to him these words, the Rebbe soll helfen, as a Teil von den Inyanim, was the Rebbe gewollt es finden, soll sich es finden durch dir. It's tremendous. It's a great bracha, by the way. If you go to a birthday, what better bracha? We all as Chassidim, as Shluchim know that what bigger bracha that you can say that a tale that the Rebbe came to this world to fulfill his shlichus, and that you can have the schus to do a little one part of it. That's the yechid of your life. That's the etzem nefesh. That's the etzem neshama. That's the whole reason your neshama came down below. The lower levels of the neshama is already how you implement it. So there's transcendence through chaya, and there's through Chabad neshama, and through midas it's ruach, and through meisim, and then peil mamish and behavioral is through nefesh. But what's the etzem of it all? Why are you here? What put you in this world? What's your tachlis? And this is something that you can explain even to secular people, I should tell you. Maybe they may not understand the word yechida, but the idea, the moment that you fully belong, where you feel you know exactly why you're here, and there are no distractions, and there are no other agendas, and no strings attached. That pure moment is yechida. You stand with the Rebbe in yechidus, that's what you're supposed to be experiencing. And the key here is to how do you get there? You can't get there directly. You have to get there indirectly. So let me share one more thought. I know we have around, you'll tell me more or less, around another few minutes, I guess. You said 30 minutes. So let me say this. It was Tainis Sester, I believe, right before Purim, Tovshim Memches. Made it Ikasiche. I mean, many people are not even aware of it. Later, we found the Nakuda in Ponim Yofis from the Balaf Law. But the Rebbe asked the question. And this, of course, a Yom Kippur Maisa. Pasha Kisisa is Yom Kippur. Moshe is standing on Har Sinai, begging for forgiveness. And then finally, the Eibishter says, Salachti Kidvarecha, gives him the Luchas Shnias, and he comes down on Yom Kippur. Most of that story is in Pasha Kisisa. So in Pasha Kisisa, we all know everyone knows the famous dialogue, very intimate dialogue. Moshe says to Hashem, Hareini nos chvedecha. You know, he felt there was a moment and he was connecting on a deep level. Like it says, Ki'ish medaber el re'ehu. So it says, like a person speaking to a friend, and maybe that's what the Rebbe was meramis to in that yechidus with that individual, a friend, meaning no defenses, no levushim, no blocks. And Moshe says to Hashem, Hareini nos chvedecha. The Eibishter answers the famous words, Lo yireini odam v'chai. No person can see me and live. And then he continues, and the Eibishter says, but for the Isa Sacherai, Upone lo yiro. I'll show you my back, but my face you won't see. And the Rebbe asked a bunch of questions. Briefly, he said, why does the Eibishter have to rub it in? He already said, Lo yireini odam v'chai. So what does he have to say? Uponi lo yiro. You already said you can't see me. I'm showing you my face. I'll show you my kesher shel tefillin, all the different biurim and what means achera. Secondly, what does it mean? Moshe asked for something. Why didn't he get it fulfilled? And thirdly, why does the Torah have to tell us that he was rejected? Even Begnusu shel behema temeya, the Torah doesn't speak. Why tell us Moshe asked for something and he didn't get it? And to add that from another sikha, the Gemara says that Hashem says to Moshe, when I wanted to show you my face by the snare, you didn't want to look. Moshe covered his face. Now, when you want to see, I'm not going to show you. So the Rebbe asked the question, what is this, a kinderspiel? Tit for tat. That you went, what you wanted to see, when I wanted to show you, now you want to see, I won't show you. And the Rebbe answers it in poshet, but brilliant, mamish. Could teach us how we access Yechida. What the Eibus was telling him is like this. That's how you have to read the sentence. Then a comma, lo yiro. In other words, I will show you my back, and that you can see b'dei from chiyuvi, asogas hachiyuv. And uponai, I'll also show you my back, but my face. But uponai, the only way you could see ponai is by lo yiro, by not looking. Yidiyas hashlila. But you could see it. So the Eibishter was beferish mekayim, but he was telling him, because ili yadaita v'yisif. If you see me with your tools, you'll see me through your eyes. You want to see me as I am, my ponim, my primis, my etzem? You have to look, not look. When you're not looking, the bittul will allow you to see it. So Eibishter wasn't playing a game. He's saying, when I wanted to show you my face, you didn't want to look. That's when you could have seen it. Now you want to see it on your terms. You can't have both ways. You can't be you, a metzias, and also see ponai, because lo yireni adam v'chai. So in other words, you could see the deepest levels even of the etzem. You could even see yechida, but the only way to see yechida is not directly. You have to put aside your ego, your agenda, all your side things, and then it emerges. To quote the Kotzker once was asked, "Wo der Eibishter?" She says, "Wo me lost him arein." Where's God? Wherever you let him in, because he's everywhere. However, the problem is us. We have all these levushim. That's why it says, Koshe alai pridaschem. Pridaschem, because you're separate. The Eibishter is not pridasenu, because the Eibishter is always here. The problem is we have all these layers that don't let us see. So to experience Yechidi, you need the ultimate bittul. Put everything aside. That's why I said it's the moment where a person makes a cheshbon nefesh, el ala cheshbenis go away, that moment. And that's the Mashiach shebechol echad ve'echad. And that's the Mashiach Klali, a Rebbe that teaches us what means the real Tachlis Habriya, that is completely, purely Elokus. In the words of Tanya, Gili Elokus be'elam haza agashmi, that's what Mashiach is. So then in that Sicheb, going back to what I began, Simchas Teira Memvov, what did the Rebbe say? That a Shliach with Eser is Mashiach. That's how you Magali Yechida. The Shliach is an individual with Eser Keches HaNefesh. You could, if you don't use your Keches, so it's only Shliach. It's a great Madrege, but it's not Mashiach yet. But if you use your Keches HaNefesh, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, then what emerges is a Mashiach, Yechida, that's deeper and higher than it all. But like with the Shad Hanun, you can't reach the Shad Hanun. You have to count the 49, and B'mela then is Nizgala, the highest level, the Shad Hanun. The same thing with Yechida. So, to sum up, and if I can conclude on a practical note, bottom line is, for some of us, like Chassidim would sometimes say, my moment of emes, when was my moment of truth? The only moment of truth I ever had in my life was when I was with the Rebbe, when I was in the presence of the Rebbe. You know, there were Chassidim that said, I think it was Geshem Ber Paharer, happens to me, my great-grandfather, who said, when the last day of his life, they said, what do you look forward to? He says, he looked forward to Zogen Ken Sheker. You know, we live in a world of shkarim, and all of us lie in one way or another. Sheker doesn't mean always a black lie; it can be a white lie. It can be, you know, somewhat duplicity and so on. A moment of emes is a powerful thing, and for many of us, that moment of truth was when we stood by the Rebbe, especially when we were younger a bit and more innocent. Let's put it that way. So it's really recapturing that moment and sharing it with your balabat, with your community. I find that one of the best ways to do it is to share what you actually saw. I was just Rosh Hashanah in Florida for a program, and I shared Tkiyas, what it looked like by Tkiyas Shefer by the Rebbe. You have to see people who never saw the Rebbe in their life. I try to capture not just the Tzura, the Tzir Chitzeni, but also the feeling. So to capture that is in a way capturing Yechida and telling at least the story about it. So it's really finding a place inside your heart and soul, the purest moment, and trying to share that with others and trying to bring it out from them. And that ultimately, when we're able to be Magala that, you're Magala Shtikl Mashiach. That's what we're told. That's a Gilia Mashiach. The Alter Rebbe says, I said, Tanya, beginning of Perek Lamed Zayin, what is Mashiach? He said, Yemesa Mashiach, Tchis HaMesim, Tachlis B'riyas Elam Hazeh, Gile Erein Sov Be'elam Hazagash. That's what it means. The words of the Rambam, Mola Oretz Deis Hashem, K'mayim Le'em Mechasim, Lo Ye'eser Kol Elam El Ladasas Hashem Bolvad. What's the common denominator between all of that? That you're focusing on the Tachlis, not on the, that all of materialism, everything we do, Eser Kol Elam, Ladasas Hashem, Mola Oretz Deis Hashem, Gile Elokus Be'elam Hazeh. So we do a lot of things, but that's on the lower levels of the neshama. Yechida is where Yechida liyagdach, it's you and only Elokus, the Tachlis. So the Eibusher Zoltaka helfen that all of you as shluchim who are doing the Rebbe shluchah shel Odom Kamesei should be zeichet to fulfill, as the Rebbe told my father-in-law in the Broche, a tale from the Inyanim from the Rebbe Zol Zechesfirim Dorech Dir, the Milui, and we should all have a Chsima and Gmachsima Teva B'Shlemus. This is the time of year where we get all these keiches, especially Yechida Dik keiches, and especially through the Rebbe. And it should be finally been Megala within us, at least as much as possible that we can do, like he says in Tanya, as much as possible to try to be a tzaddik, try to be a Yechida, and then that Ulei Kulei Chayva Ulei, and the Eibishter will do the rest, and bring us and be Megala, the Yechida Klolis, Mashiach, and Mizozech Zain, Zenzach Rem Dolamata Masoret Fochim, Vahu Yigolenu. Agmar Chsimateva, good gebenched Yor.
Amen.
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 Amen. I think to a certain degree, if I may, the bracha that you said that you've got is that you should be the Mashiach, because if the Mashiach Shabbatar is working through you, it hates that Mashiach is working through you, and then in that moment you are being manifested. Your Mashiach, the Mashiach is your skashis to the Nasi Adair and the Yichida Liyachta. So I think to a certain degree, if each one of us had that sense that when we are doing our shluchas, that at that point we are being manifest Mashiach, we'd be doing it with a uniquely special bittul and chayis. And then I think our balabatim would perceive that, and then we can, by leading by example, encourage them to the same way to be manifest the Mashiach Shebekir Bam. Simon, do you have a few minutes? If anybody has a couple questions, can we?
Sure.
So
right
again, let's just open the floor. If anybody has anything that they want to ask on this or something else, you have an opportunity to bring Kessel Aser. To hear from to ask all your questions, I'm sure, from all the Maimarim and the Chulu that you've been learning copiously.
People are shy. Maybe
People that didn't see.
Oh, ask your question again.
Actually, I did see, so I'm able. I actually described it in Rosh Hashanah a little bit, but people that didn't see, you're saying describing your experience by the Rebbe. What about the generation that didn't see? What's your advice?
A good point. That's a good question. I mean, I shared what I saw, but look, at the end of the day, what we saw is the Gashmizdika part. I think each of us has to find, I mean, every shliach, I'm sure, can dig somewhere, like what was that moment that you decided to go on shlichus, or what was the moment that connects you? Even today, I mean, people tell me sometimes they go to 770, they go to the oil, wherever. Everybody has their experience. Obviously that's the easiest in a way. I would say to those that have not seen, you have to find some moment of truth that you really can say, here's like that moment. I mean, that's what you really want to convey, especially when you come to Yom Kippur and you come to whether it's Kol Nidre, especially in the Ila, Napoleon's March. Some hergish of Eined Milvadia. I would just look for something that resonates within you. If someone says, I have nothing that resonates within you, then maybe we need to Farbrengen more. But you need to find something. You need to find that moment. It's not always going to be this second of your life. It could be something that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was that a person. I would just look for something of that nature. It could be a story of the Rebbe that really touched you deeply. It could be your own little miracle. Something that really happened in your life that really shook you up in a good way, and like a wake-up call. I mean, I'm just giving many examples. You just have to find. I do find this. I'll just say this. I'll add this. I was once speaking to a group of shluchim, and they were talking about how to communicate. So I asked them all a question. I said, if you have a half hour with a whole bunch of new balabat, people came to see you once, and you don't know if you'll ever see them again. What would you say in that half hour? Just what would be your pitch, so to speak? What would be? And it was interesting. Some shluchim said, I'd like to get a donation. I don't know if you could do that in a half hour. Some people said, I'd like them to come back, something inspiring. So I told them, what you want to gain whenever you meet anybody is the most important thing is trust. Trust. Because if they trust you, they're going to come back. If they don't trust you, you can say the most brilliant things and they'll find other outlets. So how do you build trust? In a very simple way. Share your life. Don't just speak in yonim, musagim, concepts. Share your personal life. They should see that you're like one of them. I don't mean that you're equal to them, but they should see that you go through experiences and challenges just like they go through it. There's nothing better than creating trust when people see there's something in common. When I say common, you talk about a personal experience, you talk about even a personal setback and how you dealt with a challenge. You can't imagine how much that creates a bond, and people don't realize it. Many shulchan feel I'm supposed to share my personal things. I'm not saying you have to share every confidence, every personal experience of yours, but the more you find something that they can identify with, the more the bond is created. And in many ways, I don't know if I call it a yechida connection, but it's a connection where they see you're vulnerable, they see that you're able to be honest and open. That's in a way the story like I shared about being a friend, that you are there for them and they don't have to see you as a Superman. I'm not saying you have to expose that all your weaknesses, but a human experience. So I would say, if someone asked you, why did you become a shliach? Someone from your community, what would you answer? What would be your answer? Personal answer, not just the Rebbe said, let's go on shlichus, we're going to change the world. Why did you personally, you and your wife, become a shliach? These things can have tremendous impact when you share them in a very sincere way. Some examples, at least. Maybe some people have other thoughts.
Thank you.
Or,
But how do you
wanted to
get?
ask-
How do you have that inspiration a whole day, or try to have it many times, more than once a year at least, or once a month, or once? You have to have that.
I wish I had the answer to that $1 million question. Rab Nissen used to say, when they asked him, he said that Moyach Shal Talev is not a lifetime thing. It's every second. Halt sich up, ein Sekunde, and then the next second. It's hard for me to tell you that you can have it every second of the day. I wish I could say that. I wish I could say it's practical. So what you do is you try to shoot for as many moments as possible. I'll just talk for myself. When I am giving a shir, or I'm counseling someone, or I'm doing something else, writing something, the more moments like that I have, the more truth I have. When I'm busy with my eigene Sachen, the eigene Shtusim, whatever it is, Gashmias, whatever it may be, I'm usually not there, to be honest. So I think that Rebbe gave us a way. Maybe Chassidim Amol, Chassidim Rishenim, their way was they could sit 6 hours under a talus and daven. They could be sitting in Mizbeinin and Avot Chassidus for a whole day or whatever. I think for us, it's serving. The more you connect, the more you committed to things, those are pure moments. There's no way that you're going to help someone do a mitzvah and that you're not in some way connected there. So I look at it more like finding as many opportunities as possible. I don't know if we can just always bring ourselves through Meichen and Midas alone That's why I think it has to do with pu'ulas and activities. Now, obviously, if you like learning Chassidus and your Nefesh Habamis likes learning Chassidus, I can assure you, learning Chassidus is a great way to get there, because Chassidus brings you to that place. And every day I give a shir Nayim Beis, and my Nefesh Habamis happens to like it too. And when your Nefesh Habamis likes something, you stick with it usually. So the more you can, if you have a geschmack in Chassidus, in learning Chassidus, or geschmack in reading Likutei Diburim for that matter, or Nigunim. I once came to a shliach. I remember I was there for Shabbos, and I found very interesting. Friday afternoon, all Friday actually, he has the Rebbe's Nigunim playing in the background in his house on the speakers. Pasha the Rebbe himself singing, and it created a ruach. I really felt it was like a geheben ruach, his family and so on, preparing for Shabbos. You never know that you have to find things that connect, and the more you have that, the more it works. That's how I would do it. And the more the merrier, as they say. I don't know, as I said, beyond that, there are no magic tricks, to be very honest. Like the Rebbe would say, "Trach wegen mir." You have a challenge or something. Trach wegen dem Rebbe. Trach wegen a story, something. Can you maintain it? Halavai. And if you can't, that doesn't mean that you should not try the next second. So there's always another minute, another opportunity.
So it's basically, I understand, it's basically taking yourself out of the picture as much as possible.
Oh yeah.
That's basically it.
The self is always an issue.
By the way, I do join your share once in a while. So yashikach.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, getting the self out is a very good thing to do. Very refreshing. But sometimes the self itself it's good for the self to get the self out of the way. It's good. It's refreshing. Yeah. I find that when the more I deal with somebody else's issues or challenges, like mispal ba'at chavere hunan atchila. The taich is the more you help someone, it comes back. It's just part of it. Meir eni shneim avaya, what the Alter Rebbe says in Akdama Tanya. You shouldn't be prava shiflu shel sheker, and you have to help. And when you help another, it shines back to you.
And that's my deal. Also, two nafshel kiss and one nafshel bamas in the same meaning.
Yeah, and even like an event like this, True B'Nei V'Yeit, we have the what do you say? The Rebbe always uses the expression by the Kinus HaShluchim. El Echav Yemer Chazak, Ish L'Sre'eyu Yazeru, El Echav Yemer Chazak. That there's a synergy when we come together, and I'm going to give a yesher keach to the organizers for that reason. That alone has keach. As in Chassidim kommen zusammen, it's bigger than, greater than Malach Mecholiv.
I may just throw in a little suggestion here to your question, especially as shluchim that we have to Yom Kippur, we have to give so many sermons, as Eiffel drushes. I would suggest we should talk to ourselves, but speak loud. People should hear you. But don't speak to the other. Rennen zu sich und gerne mehr gehe ich sich zu hören. And then maybe wird man ankommen zu ein bisschen Emes.
Hey, you have to have a little courage for that, but yeah.
Definitely, that works 100%. Bechlolus, I would add to the first thing for the chizuk. I think every time we speak to anyone that comes to us personally, or we speak to the crowd, everyone is looking for a chidush. They hear all different types of inspirational things. Bringing down to them, to their level. For them, it's like the tainuk from Tziparim Daberis. It's a whole new thing. They never heard that before. So many people inspired with so many things, but with Avot Chassidus, it really penetrates. Further, Avot Chassidus Rebbe, Mizmakashin to Rebbe. So it's true. And the same mindset, what you gain is that when you walk away from that, you feel inspired yourself because you know that you spoke to yourself also. That's not that those words is what I needed the most. So it works out for everyone. Sai for the Shemeya, Sai for the Mashmiya. So that's been the experience. Every time I walk away from talking to someone to inspire that person, I walked away more inspired myself.
That's why the Baal Tekeh makes a bracha l'shmaya b'kol shofar. And even the mashmiya is really just a shemeya.
Yeah.
right?
I'll add one more thing I want to add. I was going to say it before, I'll say it now. Remember, even Mashiach itself, the concept of Mashiach, which for some sounds, like Arenu, Leata, etc. It's like, the future. If you make it tangible in the sense of like the Rebbe's words in Achrei Kdeishim Nun Aleph, it's putting the Aleph of Alufa Shalelam in Gela, and that makes Geula. It's similar to Shliach plus Eser Keches. What does that mean? It means take the world as it is right now and reveal what its real tachlis is. That is really the best we can do in bringing Geula to the world. We can't create Chiyas HaMesim, and we can't rebuild the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi Begashmis. But what we could do is show people, here's your life, and here's so-called the Tachlis, the Elikus Shebezeh, the Aleph, the Alufa Shalelam, the Agdus, the Echad. That is something, is essentially you bring Magali Yechida, the Nukuda Atzmis, in everything around you. You probably heard me speak about the Rebbe's letter to that dry cleaners, the lesson from cleaners. I don't know if you ever saw the letter. Made an example for this. Well, the Rebbe used a cleaners, kipshute, dry cleaners, as a lesson for the neshama of how you refresh the neshama. So, Bekitza, the Rebbe basically says you take a garment, and even though it got dirty, you put it in water, and warm water, you mix it with chemicals, you put it under a press, and you have a fresh garment. What's the lesson in Aveda? But then life covers it up, like I said, nefesh, ruach, neshama, and so on, and it's dirty. So what do? You have to put it in ein mayim elatera, warm water, vadimkeit, and chemicals is the mitzvahs, and Kabbalah Seil is the press, and you have like a fresh neshama shenesatibi. So after I read that letter, every time I see a dry cleaners, I remind myself of the Rebbe's letter. It's no longer just a cleaners. Cleaners is a moshel, for elikus. And if you could look at a pizza shop that way, you could look at an ice cream store, and you could look at a grocery shop, and you could look at a computer, technology, and so on. Everything is really just an example for elikus. So you really be Magal Mashiach, the Yechida in each thing. This is part of also of how we make it very real. It's not just a Mashiach will come, and then everything will be beautiful. No, right now you could be Magal Elikus and Magal Mashiach in every detail. Then there's the collective Yechida and Mashiach. That is the whole picture. Just to add a little more on that topic.
Thank you. I saw that practically. We have a preschool that we run, and the teacher was teaching my 5-year-old daughter about the different tkiyas. And it was by broken lines, like a long line is a tkiya, like a bunch of broken lines. So my daughter was walking down the street and tells my wife that she sees tkiyas on the floor. It was like 3 cracks in the floor. She the shofar, the sound of the shofar, it's on the floor. And it was like unbelievable for me to get that, where 5-year-old is walking and she sees tkiyas a shofar. Just an unbelievable thing.
Steht in Dach.
The other called Paul, Kiata Palta.
Right. The Tkiya Pshuta is Avedas HaTzadikim. The Shvarim Trua is Avedas HaTshuva. So something that needs a ticker.
Let's hear the Tkiya Gedoyla.
Oh, man. If you can excuse me, there's an elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is the 33 or 35 years since the new elephant on the base. And, it seems when people ask, well, that was 30 years ago. And, I personally try to say that everything's processed and use different, mashalim. But the reality is that Torah Shvi isn't getting any younger. So how do you at least one says maybe we're in the first tekufa of Mashiach, and then there's a second tekufa. I'm looking for a way to approach it so that it makes it a little bit more palatable to people.
Okay, I'll share my thoughts on this. I don't have an answer. Let's just begin without mincing words here I don't have an answer why Gimel Tammuz happened, period, and why we're here now, almost 30 years from then. And before that, Chav Zayin Adar. I also don't have an answer of why the Holocaust happened and why 6 million Jews, innocent Jews, and 1.5 million innocent children were massacred. I also don't have an answer why it's taken 2,000 years since almost 2,000 years. But I feel consoled by this. This is what I would say. The Rebbe himself, especially in the last year or two, Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, the Rebbe said a number of times, he said, we finished everything, and now we're just waiting for the Gula to emerge, to appear. We have to open our eyes, all the different expressions the Rebbe used. And then the Rebbe says, so why did Mashiach not come yet? And the Rebbe answered more than once, quite a number of times, so if the Rebbe himself said that, I find that not to be necessarily a voice of weakness or surrender. It means we don't know certain things in life. You know, we all pray for a beautiful year. But I got a call this morning, someone calls me, tragedy struck a day after Rosh Hashanah. Didn't we just pray yesterday for a Shnas to be Chashvenu b'Sefer HaChaim and should be only L'chaim, v'lei l'moves, v'chulu, v'chulu. How could that be? How could God strike my child the day after Rosh Hashanah? So all I can do is cry with the person. I don't have an answer. What answer am I going to say? I'm going to come up with some brilliant answer that it's a Maisa with Gilgulim or some Chvezvos. We don't have answers to many things, and I will not hesitate to say I don't have an answer to this question. The question is, once you don't have an answer, what do you do now? You could either get paralyzed and not do anything because the questions just stop us, or you forge ahead. What I know is from the Jewish people and the Rabbeim. You know, the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America in 1940. The Jews are being killed in the worst possible way, a bloodbath in Europe. He comes in a wheelchair in America, but he does not give up. He doesn't say, you know, it's over. He had many questions, I'm sure. So what we know is Vayiso, you forge ahead, and you just do what has to be done. I don't see another option. The other option is surrender, which is much worse, which would mean giving up and saying, because of all these questions, it didn't get fulfilled till now. I mean, I trust me, I've enough skepticism myself. I have enough skepticism inside me. So the other option is it didn't happen in 30 years. Who says it's going to happen the next 30 years? Yeah, there's that voice, but we have to control that voice. That's ultimately, to me, that doesn't lead anywhere. That just leads to hopelessness, to resignation. You know, so those that have pure emunah, they don't even allow that voice in. I can't say that. I have that voice. I just don't let it affect me. Like he says in Tanya, you have the machshav, the hirur, and then you just don't let it affect your life. Because I believe in the truth of the cause and the mission, and that's what carries us. And that's it. So I appreciate your asking the question, by the way, because I think many people have it. But the answer has to be is we don't have an answer, but we still have to do what we have to do. And I'd love to hear someone else's alternative option that is productive. Like the Rebbe says in letters, we don't know why. We don't ask why. We ask, what are we going to do about it? And that's what I live by. And I'm sure that many of you probably concur with that. We ask, what are we going to do? You know, that's ultimately the question I ask myself.
Well, if it's an avua, then there's no questions. Adrabah, we want it faster the better, but it's an avua, it has to happen.
But that's exactly
that it will happen is no shak and shayla. Question is, why not today? And why does it take another day? That's the question.
And the answer is, why not today? It could be today. It will be today.
And nachanami. But I'm saying you can't, but the 30-year question can be very, very overwhelming. Let's be honest. People ask it. It's not, you can't ignore the question. I'm not ignoring the question. I'm just saying that the question, the Rebbe once said about Amunah, Akasha macht nicht schwacher and Empfer macht nicht starker. That's how it comes down to, you know. Zusha, I see Zusha wants to say something.
No, but that's why this group, Kavyoch, is called Minatzchim. What's the idea? We focus on what we need to do, not on the questions that we may harbor. And that's what the point is.
Yeah, but remember, Zusha, and everyone should know, there are people who have this question and they don't feel they're allowed to ask. No, they feel that they'll be dismissed and that something's wrong with you and so on. That's why he called it the elephant in the room. I understand exactly where it's coming from.
But that's why nobody cut off the question, right? But the point is,
but I think
where do you want to put your focus? Right? We all
Yeah.
have questions. This is the Alma de Shikra of questions. This is the Geula, it's nine questions. And after the Geula, it's I know Tiyufta Kusha, right? Now we have questions. But am I getting bogged down because of the question? Or am I focusing on what I need to do?
But maybe the question is, how do you keep that energy going when some of these questions are so glaring? That may be, how do you keep the...
I think to that, I think that's why the Rebbe, forgot who it was. There's a certain chassid had a relationship with Alter Chassid. I forgot who it was. I don't remember who it was. That had a relation, and the Rebbetzin was once talking to the Rebbetzin, and the Rebbetzin once said to him as the Tatig hat Chassidim. She said about the Friedrich Rebbe, the Tatig hat Chassidim. I think the chassid answered, "When eure Mann hat Soldaten." That the Rebbe trained us, I think, in this regard. That doesn't mean that we're automatons. We're not robots. We're soldiers. There's a difference between robots and soldiers. The shiloh's hot man, and it hurts. And fakert, we use that pain. I think, at least for me, to be a part of the catalyst to make sure that we'll each do our part. That today doesn't end with the shiloh, but today ends with the answer. With Mitzvah Hashem, and I think that's the Rebbe made us soldiers for this reason, because the shilas could bog down an intellectual and could bog down an emotional person, but a soldier doesn't have the luxury to be bogged down. A soldier can fight.
I think the Rebbe himself answered that exactly in this way. Apparently, when the eye doctor asked the Rebbe, I've seen all the wonderful work that you've seen in Mishluchim do. How come Mashiach is not here? So the Rebbe said, and I have the same question, but therefore I don't let my Chassidim sleep. That's the good. Question's a valid question, no question about it. Can't just shove it under the rug, but it's a question. But we got to focus on what we need to do.
In my experience, the first thing, I validate the question. I said your question should be validated, and I think you should write it down, every single question that you have, because there will be an answer to all of them. But the questions are coming from Seichel. We have to be in the mode of Emunah now. Hecher from Seichel. So it's true. The Eberstein and Geben Seichel, we have the right to ask. The Seichel is doing its job. The Seichel is doing what it should be doing. But then you should use our Seichel to verstehen Chassidus, to understand the Torah. What we're able to understand. What we're not able to understand, put it down. The questions are a valid question. And Tishrei there'll be answers to all the questions, but put that aside. Put in a notebook. Hold on to it, but know that the path should be paved with emunah, because those questions are obstacles, and you put the obstacles on the side. Know that they're true. We have the right to ask. So keep them. When Mashiach will come, we'll have all the answers.
I would recommend, if I may, look at the Maimonim of Pesach Tovshin Tes from the Friedrich Rebbe. The Maimonim, he speaks about that the Birur HaAchrin is Birur Esav and Yishmael. That's Netzach and Hoid, which is all about Midas HaNetzachen and Midas HaYedah. That we may not have answers, we don't understand necessarily, we don't necessarily have Ava V'yira, but then Netzach and Hoid. Very interesting Maimonim that I think can help a lot in the takeif and the approach of how to forge ahead when you don't have answers to all your questions.
Right.
To a certain degree, I would say fakert. The questions are, there's a sikha, I think, from Purim Katan Tavshin Daled Mem, where the Rebbe says that fakert, if we stop asking the questions, ut ersh is the problem. Fakert, it should bother us. And when the kind hertuf zuchen, that's when the cheshach. So we should be constantly bothered by the fact that it's almost 30 years. That's exactly what should be bothering us. And we go with the midas and the tzachana and the munah to make sure that that's something, we do something about it, rather than just be complacent with this reality. I think the question, the lack of comfort, the discomfort is key to the continued effort.
Yeah.
If I can chime in over here, I heard somebody say Teku before, and if we're on the topic of we're seeing Mashiach b'Muchash, I mean, I think it's known in Israeli elections. Every time there's a hung election, everybody says it's a teku. So teku essentially has translated itself now into modern vernacular, but meanwhile, that half the people, I'm like 95% of the people have no idea what it actually means. What it means is that all these Yidden are believing in Mashiach, that eventually the answers are going to come.
Okay.
You're saying that there's not going to be a resolution to the Israeli elections until Mashiach comes.
On many levels, yeah.
In Israel, teiko in the modern language means when the game is tied. That's what teiko.
Stalemate.
But I would say like this: there's two outcomes to the questions. It could be atzvus or it could be meridus, because it bothers us. If it brings to atzvus, that brings us down. It's a flat tire. It doesn't take us anywhere. But if it brings us to meridus, which is in the Hasidic vocabulary, it is a good thing. Mashen kanatzvus is a treifazach. So the meridus has an energy. It's a spinning wheel that takes us somewhere. So the moment it bothers us with meridus, not with atzvus, that brings us to action. So it bothers me as they feel that I take that energy, I'm going to do something to bring 1 day closer, 1 minute closer. That's my 2
like
points.
It says in Tanya, yeah. Meridus, it motivates you. Then that's the good sign, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other elephants? Any other elephants?
We want
No, now we have the elephant. Now we just need the donkeys. So the Mashiach riding one of them specifically.
Or Imanan Shmaya.
Yeah, that's right.
The Nefesh Habamis is the big elephant. Aber wir kommen zusammen, we're talking about 22 Nefesh Elokis against 1 Nefesh Habamis here. So we have nothing to worry about the elephant.
But sometimes one Nefesh Habamis can be quite powerful.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. I want to, on behalf of all the Minatzchim and everybody, all the Shlochim and everybody, and Mitzvah Hashem, all the Balabatim that nemen all the that we've in a sense together collected over here, and we'll share Mitzvah Hashem. It'll be inspiring to others. Big grace in Yashikech to Rav Simon. And a good Gebanshiyar, that you should be able to do the Rebbe's durchführen the Welt etwas. I don't know punkt Lashon, but a large amount should be durchgeführt durch euch, durch uns alle. Most importantly, we know that der Shishi, der Shvi'i can sagen sicher that what that means is the Gula Shlema and nothing less. So Mitzvah Hashem, we shall all be zeicha to Firois and today already. Mitzvah Hashem, continue the Farbrengen in Yerushalayim. Grace and Yeshukech and Gemach Simat Tevet.
Amen. Yeshukech, Gemach Simat Tevet.
Gemach Simat Tevet to you all. Thank you. Very good. Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you.
Yeshukech, all those that were part in organizing. Koltov, we'll see everybody Mitzvah Hashem in the base of Mikdash next month for a continued conversation of victory.
Will the recording be available? Can people see the recording if they need? Yeah.
Yes.
I'll share it with you. I'll share it with you.
Where can you get the recording?
The recording is posted every week to a channel that the Minatzchim.
Send the link to everybody. Send the link.
Yes, and
we do. We always send the link, but you have to be on the group to get the link. So I'll send it to you.
Please send the link.
Or you can join the Minatzchim WhatsApp group.
I don't know if Minatzchim is a very big term. What are the requirements to be part of this elite division?
You're already part. That's what that's.
I was going to say. He's definitely part of it. Definitely.
Yeah, I said
he's one of.
But share it for everyone. If people are not on the group, anyone who is here, maybe just find a way. I don't know. Maybe put it in the chat here.
A few hundred people on this group that get the WhatsApp.
But in Mitzvah Hashem, yeah, we'll put it out there. Forget this is, I think, a very good advertisement for this very powerful thing that is happening here weekly and monthly where shluchim are getting together and re-inspiring and reinvigorating each other on this on our shluchas ikris, and that's the point. So yes, the recording will be made as widely available as possible on the WhatsApp and any other sources. In fact, what I think we're all going to do is we're going to later share the recording on the various WhatsApp groups that we're all part of outside the Minatzchim, and encourage everybody to participate in this more regularly. So again, yes, and one I'm sure Rabbi Mendel Rubenfeld will send it to you, Rabbi Simon, so you'll have it. But a grace and yashikech, everybody. Again, the Maganim, and Mitzvah Hashem, say everybody. We said next week for the next Minatzchim group, as we said, that will be no doubt a victory lap in the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi when we did that.
2 o'clock every Tuesday, 2 o'clock.
Every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. In Mitzvah Hashem.
Pacific time.
Reb Ruven, you're on mute. Reb Ruven, you're on mute.
11 o'clock Pacific time.
Just a little something. The idea of the Minatzchim is simply to put the pot back onto the fire for 1 hour a week till it starts bubbling.
Front burner.
That's what it is. It starts to front burner, because usually we get busy. So the point over here is that we keep Mashiach on the front of our mind, and it creates this warmth and this energy. We bounce off each other's energies, and we go from atzvus to meridus to simcha. And that's how we move the energy forward. So big yashikoyach.
Yes.
Ruven, nice to see you.
Yes,
I know you're here.
Nice to see you too. A good gebench year.
A good gebench year.
Good everybody. Be well. Thank you again. Have the gula here before your next Minatzchim session.
Amen.
This will be ready after the Nitzachim.
Amen.
Agmar of Ugalos and Achsim Teve.
Amen.